Let me ask you about one other film that I'm intrigued with, and it's The Conqueror, where all the radiation seems to have contributed to the death of Susan Hayward and your dad and Lee Van Cleef and Pedro Armendariz and Dick Powell.
The cast and crew of the film had some ridiculous demographic. Something like 50% of the people contracted cancer after working on this film, and the thing is like 8% in the country, so it's a ridiculous number of people.
Hi, film fans. I'm Rob Word. Welcome to another special edition of A Word on Westerns. Today we're honoring yet again the biggest movie star the world has ever known. Of course, I'm talking about John Wayne. We're honoring him on the anniversary of his June 11th death. A little bit later on, his son Patrick will be joining me to talk about his dad. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about The Conqueror, a film that may have hastened his death. We'll also touch on the controversy surrounding all the deaths from cancer from those who were involved in the making of The Conqueror, including John Wayne's June 11th, 1979 death from cancer. The Conqueror was one of two films RKO and Howard Hughes produced starring John Wayne. Jet Pilot, filmed in 1949, was the other. It would be the last film produced by the eccentric billionaire. Duke had hoped Hughes might aid in funding his dream project, the Alamo. It didn't happen, but Duke had already signed on with Hughes and honored his contractual obligation. Of course he did. Too bad the role he was given, Genghis Khan in full Dr. Fu Manchu makeup, was far, far outside his wheelhouse.
You do well, Kumlik. For while I have fingers to grasp a sword and eyes to see, your treacherous head is not safe on your shoulders, nor your daughter in her bed.
Future Oscar winner Susan Hayward is Khan's lusty lover. Also in the cast are Pedro Armendariz, who had a major role with Duke in Fort Apache, Agnes Moorehead, John Hoyt, William Conrad, and Lee Van Cleef, among others. Singer, actor, turned big-time producer Dick Powell directed the epic. Unfortunately for many involved in the 1956 disaster, The Conqueror was to be called an RKO radioactive picture. The reason behind that label are the desert locations chosen for the filming. The production was told that an area near St. George, Utah, had the perfect landscape. Exotic, imposing rock formation, and lots of sand. But what about any radioactive contamination from the dozen or so nuclear tests that had taken place in the area? All were told by the Atomic Energy Commission that radioactivity was not a problem, and filming began. Geiger counters were distributed, and the buzzing sound was often heard as radioactive hotspots were in the piles of sand near Snow Canyon, Utah. Pedro Armendariz Jr. was told by his father of being hosed down with water to remove the heavy dust created by the constantly blowing winds. Of the stars and personnel who worked on The Conqueror, nearly 100 developed a cancer of one sort or another. 46 died, including John Wayne and cast members Hayward, Armendariz, Moorehead, and director Dick Powell of cancer. That death toll does not include what could be dozens more from the Navajos who were enlisted as extras to portray the horseback-riding Mongol hordes. John Wayne's June 11th death at the age of 72 is still the subject of controversy. Was it really from nuclear fallout contracted during the making of The Conqueror? Some say it was a lifelong smoking habit. I guess we'll never know. Hi, I'm Rob Wood. Welcome to A Word on Westerns. We are so happy to be back at the Autry Museum for our tribute to John Wayne. And who could be better to talk about John Wayne than me?
No, you're done.
I'll tell you who. It's Patrick Wayne. He's right here. Hey, Phil.
Rob, nice to be here. Thank you. We have a few choices. I've got a brother and two sisters still with us.
Well, we got to get him here.
Yeah, you got to get him here.
You just went to one of the marathons to raise money for...
Yeah, the John Wayne Cancer Foundation supports the grit runs. We were in Pioneer Town, which is out by Yucca and Joshua Tree, not too far from Palm Springs. Beautiful part of the world. The run was treacherous. I mean, there were narrow things through rocks, and my niece fell and skinned her leg up.
Whoa.
Yeah, it wasn't like running on a track.
How was the weather?
Weather was hot. It was very hot. In Pioneer Town, it's an elevated area, and normally it doesn't really ever get above 65 or 70. For the 2 days we were there, it was in the 90s. The next day after the event, it went back down into the 70s. It's gorgeous up there.
What was Pioneer Town like? They've restored it, haven't they?
Yes, they have. It's still very rugged. It's still rugged, but you're rustic, exactly, and but quaint, charming, and there's a lot of really interesting areas around the Pioneer Town. So there's a lot of stuff to do. Exquisite views and sunsets, and it's really a lovely area.
Well, it must have been something special for you growing up with your father, who was a superstar, but he was just like a regular dad to you, strict, wasn't he?
Yeah. Look, the guy had an incredible presence, which obviously people who got to know him, when he walked into a room, I mean, literally everything stopped. And he was a very charming and disarming guy. So in 5 minutes, you'd be talking to him and you would think you've known him all your life. So he had both those elements going, but that presence that's where the strictness came from. If he took a look at you and did something, you just behaved. So we knew, the parameters of where we could behave, and we pretty much stayed in there.
But it seemed like you were all around on the sets when you were growing up. I know Rio Bravo, you even had a role in that too. What was that like as a kid? Did you have much freedom on the set, or were you sort of sequestered by whoever the director was and said, keep those kids out of here?
They were very unsuccessful at doing that. Yeah, we were pretty much loose. At the time I had a brother and 2 sisters in the early days. There are now 7 of us, but at the time it was just the 4 of us. My older brother and my 2 sisters were really not that interested in being on the set or being around filming or even being in film. So that was something that I shared with my dad alone. So it's a kind of special time for me. But I got into trouble no matter what. Yeah.
Well, on films like that, were you put in a special place with other kids if there were kids, or did you bunk with your dad one time? You told me a story about bunking with your dad one time where you pretended you were asleep.
Well, that was, you mentioned Tombstone before. When we were filming the McClintock, we were mostly in Old Tucson, and then that mud fight sequence, which is a pivotal part of the film, was done closer to Tombstone. So we moved from Old Tucson to Tombstone. Well, they don't have a great deal of accommodations in Tombstone, and my dad and I shared a room there in the motel. It was not, it was Motel 6, linoleum floors. And the other thing about these 4 days that we were there, like I was saying about before about Pioneer Town, in Old Tucson, it was like 90s every day. When we go to do the mud fight, we had to be in the water and all that, it was in the 40s. In the morning, that was frozen over. They had to put a space heater in there to soften it up and moist so we could shoot in there. So that 4 days was like crazy. So we're in this motel with a cold floor. So my dad and I, we would go to bed and we'd have the TV on at night and fall asleep with the TV on. And I woke up this one night and the TV was, that white screen, and it was so annoying and it was so cold. I had the covers like right up to here. And I looked at that linoleum floor. I knew that had to be, you could, trees on. So I had to see my dad over there. He starts to move around a little bit. So I close my eyes, I'm squinting through my eyes looking. My dad wakes up and he looks at the TV, and then he looks over at me like this. And I mean, he's just willing me to wake up, I'm biting the inside of my lips, trying not to laugh or anything like that. And finally he throws the covers back and starts tiptoeing across this floor. Well, I couldn't keep it in anymore. I had to laugh because that's like one of the only times I got a good one on my dad. And it was a great one. That was fun.
There's channels now like INSP or Grit. All of them it's John Wayne all the time. And I know he made over 100 movies.
Oh, 162. So
Well, they're running all the time, and it's great. People love them, and they're discovering them, a younger generation, I think, because of the desire for Western knowledge. Now, let me ask you about, there's something in the museum that just intrigued me, and it was his station wagon with the strange domed roof on that.
Yeah, right down the street here, Barris, I can't forget, what's his first name? George Barris. My dad would take the Pontiac and he'd raise the roof 6 inches so he could get in and out with a hat on. Let him take his hat off. Practical man. And there is one of those. He had several of them done. In fact, one night I got one. When he'd have a new one, then I'd get one from him, and then he'd have the newer one. So one night we were at the. It's a long story. I have time?
Yeah.
We had an event, a gala at the Beverly Hilton Hotel, and so the party breaks out and everybody's pouring out, and Mitchum says to me, "Let's go in the bar and have a cocktail. Wait till the crowd goes, and then we'll leave." So sure, we go in there, and Mitchum sits down at the piano, and he's singing, and it was like the best part of the evening. The party was, anyway, we're starting about 45 minutes. I go out there, and I turn my ticket in, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm going, "Where's my car? Where's my car?" I said, "Sir, there's no car." That's his response. So I figured out what happened is that my car came up when my dad went out, and he just took it. He said, "I'm getting out of here." So I said, "Would you go down there and see if there's a gray car with a raised roof like that?" So his car was still there, so I drove his car home. All night I'm thinking about, I may not give this back to him. So anyway, he's got one of the old ones in the museum, and we didn't do anything to it. It looks like it's been rode hard and put up with.
What brand of car was it? Pontiac.
Yeah, Pontiac station wagon.
Now, what is it about the Alamo that intrigued your dad so much that he spent a lot of his savings and devoted a good portion of his life into making that happen as a director, and then kept giving away pieces of it to get it done? But it was made a lot of money, but most of it he had to sign.
Didn't make a lot of money,
but not for him, I think.
Well, not for a while. I mean, it did eventually, with all of the distributions and television, end up in the plus. But it was. My dad had a career where the studio knew that if he made a certain film, it was going to make this amount of money. So you could make it for this and have a profit of this, and you could pay him this and all of that. Well, my dad, this was 3 times the budget of a John Wayne movie. So they don't typically, just made the kind of money that the normal film. But why he made the film, I mean, my guess is this guy came from a very humble beginning. He was born in Iowa. They made the trek across country to California. They didn't have anything. My dad, he went to high school. He was a high achiever in high school. He wanted to go to the Naval Academy. Couldn't get in there. Didn't have the political connections. He got a scholarship, a football scholarship to USC. And he broke his shoulder during the first summer and couldn't play football, lost his scholarship, couldn't afford to go to college. So he went to work where all these kids at SC went. They went to work in the film business. He was determined. He was very ambitious, and he was very driven to succeed. If any of those other things had happened, he went to the academy, Naval Academy, he'd been a Joint Chiefs of Staff. If he had graduated from USC, he would have been President of the United States. But as it happens, he went to, back into the movie business and became this huge thing. But what it did was, for a person who is ambitious, what this country offered him was an opportunity. And he never lost sight of that, or appreciated the fact that if you're willing to work, you can succeed here. And I think, he loved that about this country and wanted to talk about something that was great about this country. And I think that the story and the vision of the Alamo represented that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's still a great movie. I mean, Chill Wills is a little over the top, I think, but
really,
yeah. But let me ask you about one other film that I'm intrigued with, and it's The Conqueror, where all the radiation seems to have contributed to the death of Susan Hayward and your dad and Lee Van Cleef and Pedro Armendariz and Dick Powell. Now, I read that you were there for a portion of the shoot.
I was there for a couple of weeks, and I should have known something right away because when I was ready to go home, my stepmother drove me back, and we're not 15 minutes away, and we're on the wrong side of the freeway. And I'm thinking, this is something wrong here. This is not going to work. And it proved to be that way. The cast and crew of the film had some ridiculous demographic, something like 50% of the people contracted cancer after working on this film. And the thing is like 8% in the country. So it's a ridiculous number of people. The Conqueror, why do the Conqueror? My dad, that was, in the time when the studios were still in control and you had contracts. And my dad had a contract with
Howard Hughes.
RKO, Howard Hughes. He made 2 films for him. He made Jet Pilot and he made The Conqueror. And those were both, you will make this film. And that's what you do. Yeah, you had to make the films. So probably not perfect casting.
Your hatred will kindle into love.
Before that day dawns, Mongol, the vultures will have feasted on your heart.
They had done nuclear testing of where they shot.
Yeah, what was going on is just about 100 miles away, they were testing the bomb, but they weren't telling anybody that they were testing, and all this stuff was floating down there. On this film, it was a time, it was like everybody was going uranium crazy, everybody wanted they're going to be millionaires. And we had these Geiger counters. And you turn them on and, this thing is going all the time. We thought we're all going to be millionaires. But what it was the fallout from this testing, it was invading everybody's food and breath and everything else. I'm telling you, his name today has as much resonance as it did in 1979 when he passed away, if not more. Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you. So anyway, we still are very robust. We have a robust foundation. We talked earlier about the grit runs, and that's an association with something that we try to educate young people about skin cancer and putting on the proper prevention of the sun prevention. And then I can't think of what the number is. We've touched, hundreds of thousands of kids. It's been a great program. And the other thing that I'm so proud of is what we've done. We've had a fellowship program where we take board-certified surgeons and work with them for 2 or 3 years, and they graduate as cancer surgeons. And about 4 or 5 years ago, the Surgical Society came out and finally said, yes, if you're going to have a cancer tumor, you're better off going to a cancer oncology surgeon than just a normal surgeon. So it was a good thing. So at the end of this museum, we have a legacy wall. We've got 140 names of fellows that have gone through our program who are now leaders in their communities around the country, even around the world, either in academia or at the top, running hospitals. So it's been an amazing ride, and it continues to this day, and we're really excited about it.
Well, Patrick, I want to thank you for being here. You're always filled with great stories, and I always love listening.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. And I'm not saying this because my brother did that museum, but it really is a terrific spot if you ever get a chance to be down there. And as a bonus, Yellowstone is building a similar place right next to the museum, so there's a double treat going down.
Oh, wow.
Thank Fort Worth Stockton.
Thanks for being here.
Okay, that's it. Okay,
That's it. Thank you, Patrick. We're going to rewire. Was that nice? Okay, good. Thank you, pal.